Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Charlian Forum. My name is Chris, and today we are finishing up our last video in the series where I talk about jobs within the roles of Final Fantasy in the Endwalker, or I'm sorry, the Dawntrail expansion. Um, so the last one that we have to do is healers, and I'm going to do this one a little differently. There's a few reasons for that. Number one, I don't play healers in any high level content really. I will very casually play healer jobs in extremes or something like that, like if I have to. But I certainly am not a savage healer. I'm certainly not an ultimate healer. I don't fully know the intricacies of high level healer playing. So I can only really approach this from the angle of somebody who casually plays the role, and somebody who enjoys some of the jobs in the role, but doesn't necessarily enjoy the role as a whole, right? And reason two for doing this a little differently is I think that there's just a discussion to be had about the state of the healer role in Final Fantasy XIV. And if that's not an ominous foretend of how I feel about the healers overall, then I'm not really sure what is. But there's four healing classes in the game right now. There's Sage, which I'm on now, Scholar, White Mage, and Astrologian. So I have all of these leveled to 100. Now I've played them enough to understand them, and I just feel like healers in this game are not in a very good place. It's a little bit, depressing to me to just see where the healer role is at right now. And so I don't really have much good to say about it. And, instead of going through each job and talking about that job individually, I just kind of want to talk about the role as a whole, because the reality, I think, is that all of these jobs are essentially the same thing. They have slightly different tools for doing different things, but as far as a damage kit goes, they all have basically the same exact loadout. You have your spammable regular spell, Glare, Malefic, Scholar has Broil, and Sage has Dosis. You have your AoE button. You have your dot, your damage over time button. And then you have a couple of extra utility skills. Sage is the only one that has some differentiation here because it does have Toxicon, which it can use while moving with your sting gauges. It does have Pneuma, which is a large cooldown heal damage hybrid skill. And it has its new button, Psyche, which is just a 60-second nuke. Sage does have the really unique ability to do an AoE damage over time ability, which is a cool identity. I think Sage is honestly the only healer in the game that I enjoy playing, because it has a lot of damage tools at its disposal. But the basic kit is exactly the same. It has your single target shield, your single target heal, your single target, or your multi-target shield, your multi-target heal. It has a couple regens on these. It has a damage reduction ability. It has OGCD, single and group heal. It has, it has a group shield, a single target shield, and then it has some abilities to generate some resource for itself. And then it has a big group utility in Philosophia where it can spread Cardia to basically everybody in the party, restoring all of their health whenever it lands an attack. And Cardia, being that you put it on a tank and when you hit something with a spell, it heals the tank, is the most interesting healer ability in the entire game to me. It's the only thing that causes the damage and the healing part of the jobs in the healer role to interact in any way, right? White Mage kind of has this with the lilies and Afflatus Misery, but it's not the the same? I don't know, because you have to spend this resource to sort of build up to a Flatus Misery, and then you can use it. But there's no interaction between the damage kit and healing output. Um, and that, I think, this is pretty scatterbrained. I'm not super organized with this video. I'm sort of just going off vibes here. But I think that that's my main issue with the healer role right now in Final Fantasy XIV, is that the fights are designed in a way where healer damage is really important. It's a non-negligible amount of damage when you get down into it. And the difference between a healer that is DPSing and a healer that is not is the difference between clears and wipes. And having a healer that knows how to utilize their kit well enough to keep their damage rolling pretty much constantly, but also keep the party alive, that's its own sort of unique challenge. But they keep making it easier, right? They keep making new abilities that have insane regens, that have insane shields, that give you ways to just use free abilities to do free damage or get free healing. White Mage is probably the job that struggles with this the most, because its only OGCD options are a Size, which is a 40-second cooldown, and you have a Flatus Rapture and a Flatus Solace, which both require a Lily, which has a charge time. And then, outside of that, you've got a lot of regens. I mean, your White Mage has a lot of regens at its disposable. Cure 3 is really strong. Lily is pretty strong. Lily Bell. But outside of that, Temperance gives everybody, it unlocks this new ability where you get the big regen on everybody with the barrier. And that's a great ability, but again, these are all designed so that the healers can keep pressing damage buttons because damage checks are getting tighter, right? Now, the first Savage tier, this expansion is definitely not an example of that. These are pretty easy DPS checks, but we have seen with Ultimate coming out, with Fru coming out, there's some pretty tight checks. And you can just bring a Pictomancer and you're fine. But to really get through those, you need the ability to be constantly doing damage. You need high uptime jobs. Jobs like Black Mage. I think there's only been one Black Mage clear in Fru so far. There have been like 57 Pictomancer clears or something. Just because Pictomancer does not suffer from downtime, but Black Mage does. And when a boss reappears, Pictomancer can do immediate damage with motifs. Black Mage has to cast, right? So there's this dichotomy between jobs that are able to utilize downtime effectively to create opportunity for themselves in a fight, and jobs that can't. And healers pretty much can't utilize downtime to generate damage in any meaningful way, right? Maybe the only one is White Mage, because it builds lilies, which it can dump to get a Misery, which is a big dump truck of an ability. But you're really not gonna just use these for no reason unless you're about to cap. You might just dump one to dump it, but otherwise you're not gonna just like throw Rapture just to throw it. So there's this really strange thing that's happening with healers where the content is designed around the assumption that we're dealing more damage, but it's not challenging the healers in a way enough to make that extra outgoing damage and incoming damage like mean much. I saw a Twitter thread, or an X thread, whatever you want to call it. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, but somebody who is playing healer in one of the world first groups, one of the world race groups, talking about how basically every mechanic in this ultimate can just be solved by throwing a lot of MIT and then maybe tossing one large OGCD ability like Rapture and a Size. You just chuck those out after it goes off, and you can basically survive everything in this ultimate with just that. Which means that the intention is for healers to be focusing more on damage this go around, right? Sorry if you hear some noise. One of my cats is, oh, there they go. Losing their mind. But Yeah, I mean, I think that healers are just in a really strange place where the damage kit and the healing kit feel so like siloed off from one another, um that it's just like, what are we doing? You know, what's going on here? What I would love to see, and I know that anytime I've made videos like this in the past where I talk about like, I kind of wish this was this way or this was this way or that this is bad, and people are always like, oh well, it's better than the alternative, or like, what do you think is the thing that we should change? And I mean, I think that really the healer issue just is that they're really boring to play, you know, for most people. Um, Tanks have gotten so tanky, you know, the mitigation has gotten so powerful that the only thing as a healer you really need to worry about, like when I play Sage, I see a tank buster on somebody, I just throw a shield on them, and then when they get hit, I throw an OGCD, and like I just go back to ignoring them. You know what I mean? Because they're gonna be fine. There's so much healing in built into the kit of most tanks. There's so much MIT built into the kit that really the only thing I'm ever worried about is party members, DPS members, and the other healer maybe dying of raid wide mechanics. But if you're shielding properly and you're using your utilities properly, it's basically never going to happen. Except for prog when you're like learning, you know, obviously people are going to die during that. But once these fights are solved and once you're geared up a little bit, it really, the challenge of healing becomes, how do I heal as little as possible and do as much damage as I possibly can? Which I think is just like a really antithetical, strange design for a healing role, right? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, but it just feels like it's not the way that it should be. I don't know. It's really bizarre, you know, and maybe I just come from sort of more of an old school MMO background, and the way that the healer role has kind of evolved in 14 over time has become so different from what I expect that I just don't know what to make of it anymore. You know, it's fascinating to me because there's so much that we could do with healers, you know, and I'm not even necessarily, I don't even really have a problem with leaning into the fantasy of like, healers in this game are more like damage dealers that have the off role of having to heal the party. I'm fine with that, right? But if that's the case, then we need a lot more than 3 buttons, you know? Say, like I said, Sage probably has the most interesting damage kit, because it has 6 damage buttons essentially, whereas most of the other jobs have 3 or 4, you know, and they might have an ability that transforms into a damage ability. But you know, Sage has the benefit of having, like I said, it's AoE dot, which is pretty unique amongst the healers. It has its single target dot. It has its regular, just single target spam nuke. It has an AoE nuke that it can use while moving, which is nice. It has its regular AoE. It has Pneuma, which is this big laser that also heals. And then it has Psyche, which is this new 60-second button that deals a bunch of damage, right? And it also has Toxicon, which I can't show because I don't have any stings, but it's just a version of Dosis that you don't have to cast. You can hit it while moving. So Sage has this focus on like a lot of mobility, right? It can move a lot. It can, you know, use Eucrasia to augment its skills into single target or AoE dots, which is a pretty unique thing. And like, I think that Sage definitely has the most interesting damage kit, and it still just boils down to hitting Dosis nonstop and nothing else. You know, if I need to move, I'll throw a Toxicon if I have to. If I don't have a Toxicon, then I'll throw a Phlegma to move. You know, I hit Psyche when it comes up. I hit Pneuma when it comes up. And that's it. And it's fascinating to me how uninteresting it is, right? And it's even worse on some of these other jobs, like White Mage is a good example, where I have Holy, which is one of the cooler skills in the game for sure. It just is a big AoE spell bomb that stuns, which is a really fun utility to have in dungeons. I have Dia, which is my damage over time, and then I have Glare. And I just sit here and hit 7 all day. Tank gets hit, throw in a size, throw a Medica 3 to make sure everybody's regenning, back to Glare. And, I need to move. Okay, I'll pop Presence, and now I have Glare 4s. I can move for 3 casts, which is usually enough to solve every mechanic in the game. And then I'm going to go back to spamming Glare as fast as I can. And it's just like, there's got to be more. There's got to be more we can do, right? There has to be something more that we can do with these roles and these jobs to make them more interesting. Scholar, same thing. Biolysis, damage over time. I have Broil that I can cast. That's my normal cast. I have Ruin 3 that I can cast. If I need to move, it's instant. So I can run around and hit this. And then I can change Stratagem, which is my big group utility, which has a dot follow-up. And then if I need to AoE, I've got Art of War. And, that's it. That's all it's got. And it's a little disappointing to know that, like, that's the best that they think that they can do. That's all they've got. Scholar or Astro's the same way. You've got Fall Malefic, you've got your Combust dot, you've got your Gravity AoE that you can cast to deal damage in groups. You've got Divination, which turns into Oracle, I think it's called. That's just a big nuke that you get. And that's pretty much all you've got. You have your Lord on your draw, which is an AoE button that you can press and deals damage in a big radius, and you've got your cards. So it's like, I almost feel like healers are suffering from this thing where it's like, Sage is by far and away the most interesting offensive kit, but it also doesn't have any like group raid buff utility at all. It just heals. That's all. It has shields, it has heals, and that's it. But it doesn't have any raid buffs. White Mage, really boring kit as far as damage goes. No raid buffs as far as like contributing to overall damage, but it has a ton of options for really quickly restoring people and getting people up and sort of saving the run, so to speak. Scholar has Chain, which is probably the best healer utility as far as a party raid buff goes, but its kit is boring. It has to deal with jank from the fairy. There's a lot that there's a lot that's left to be desired here, in my opinion. I don't know, that might be a hot take. Astro has Astro's probably the best, like on paper, the best healer in the game. Macro is insane. Collective Unconscious is really good. Horoscope is really good. Earthly Star is really good. You have your cards, which all buff in their own way, that are all powerful in their own way. You also have Divination, which is a big raid buff. You have plenty of options for healing, plenty of options for keeping people alive, but all they have is 3 damage buttons, So it's like there's no healer that has an interesting healing kit and utility and a way to like really help the team in terms of output and throughput, right? And I think that that's just like a really bad design, because when you look at something like, like the DPS role, right? Melee versus physical range, let's just say. So Viper has zero group utility. Zero. It doesn't have any buffs for anybody except for itself. But it makes up for that by doing pretty good damage, and it's a lot of fun to play. It's just very fun to hit the buttons on Viper and just have things happen. Samurai is the same way. It's a lot of fun to just play Samurai. The flow of the job is very engaging and very interesting. It's maybe not as engaging and interesting as it could possibly be, but it's still like infinitesimally better than playing healing right now, right? Just in terms of the engagement of the combat. Ninja, same thing. It's very engaging. It does slightly less damage than those other two jobs, but it has a bunch of raid utility to make up for it. With Dokumori and Kunai's Bane, it has some defensives. It can burst from range with ninjutsus. There's just a lot of things that kind of cover the weaknesses that the kit has. Monk, similar. Very fun moment to moment. A lot of buffs, a lot of party utility. It's got Brotherhood, which is arguably one of the better raid utilities out there because it just flat increases like a bunch of damage. Just gives you 5% damage flat. There's no crit increase, direct hit increase. It's just 5% damage, right? Damage. You hit for better, bigger number. And on top of that, you get the chakras, which makes you deal more damage. So you're benefiting from it and helping your team. Reaper, same thing. Arcane Circle increases all the damage that everybody deals by 3%. And you get the added benefit of getting to Plentiful Harvest at the end, which gives you a free Enshroud, which gives you your extra ability, Perfectio. So it's like these other jobs all have this sense that I'm going to contribute to my team. And at the end of that contribution, I'm going to be rewarded personally, right? And if I don't have a way to contribute to my team, I'm rewarded with higher damage and a more interesting combat loop. So while Samurai and Viper or something like Black Mage is in a similar boat where zero group utility, but when you can play Black Mage, when you can really like plant and you can cast and you can just slam out Fire 4s and Despairs and Flare Stars and you can get a full loop in on Black Mage, oh man, it feels good. It feels great. It doesn't happen super often because you have to move so much, but it feels really good. And like the Fizz ranged, Dancer, relatively weak, personal DPS, but you have so much group utility, so many buffs, technical step, standard step, dance partner, Devilman. You have all of these things, Shield Samba, Curing Waltz. You have all of these really powerful abilities that let you do so much outside of your own character. You have ways to contribute. Bard has ways to contribute. Machinist doesn't. Machinist is the selfish ranged. It doesn't do enough damage to be worth it, but that's, a problem for balancing, not a problem for design. It's just because it doesn't do enough damage. And tanks have their own thing. I'm not going to talk too much about that. But healing, it's just like, it's all of the downsides of having a not interesting kit and all of the downsides of having the extra responsibility, and you basically get nothing for it. There's no personal reward that comes from utilizing your group utility well. There's no personal reward that comes from like shielding well. The only thing I can think of is Sage again, which is the reason I think Sage is the best designed healer personally, is that when I cast Eucrasian Diagnosis on a target, if it breaks, I get a stack of my Sting, which I can use on Toxicon, which gives me mobility, right? So that's like a reward that I get for utilizing my tools effectively, which is what should be the case. It's just really disappointing to see that there's no system in place that I have a combo of some kind on healers. I have even if it's just a 2-part combo, right? Like what if Dosis comboed into Phlegma, and when I cast Phlegma, I got, you know, a stack of Sting that I could use on Toxicon, or I got a a free resource that I could spend to, cast an OGCD instead of getting these Adder's Gall or whatever they're called. Yeah, Adder's Gall. Instead of getting these passively, what if I had to use a damage combo to generate them so that I could spend them to restore my own MP? Because that's, the extra benefit of these four abilities, which I'll use Adder's Gall, is that they restore my MP when I cast them and they keep my group alive, right? So if we're going to lean into this design of healing damage, healer damage is important. And you need to be dealing damage as a healer. It's the expectation that you're dealing damage, that you're not just standing there waiting for damage to come out. Then there has to be something more interesting than I'm going to stand here and hit this one button. And then every 60 seconds, I'll hit this other button. And then every minute or 2 minutes, I'll hit this other button. And if I have the stacks to hit this other button, I'll hit this other button instead. That's just, it's not enough, right? It's not enough. There needs to be a system in place where healers have some kind of linkage between I am expected to do damage, I do damage, I am rewarded for doing damage. That reward allows me to keep my party alive better and or support them in some way, right? So, Dancer, I hit technical step. If I just hit technical finish right now, it's not worthless, quote unquote, but it's not as good as it could be. I am rewarded for engaging in this mini game and then pressing the button. I'm rewarded for that. I get a stronger damage output. I get a buff. I get the reward for completing things in a certain order, doing things in a certain step. And I think that system at its root is like the encapsulating design of Final Fantasy, right? That's why actions are comboed. That's why there are rotations and openers that, are optimal and make the most sense, because I am rewarded for doing things in the right order. I'm rewarded with higher damage. I'm rewarded with better output. I'm rewarded with better alignment. I'm rewarded with something for doing these things in a particular way. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a solution. It's a problem that I think doesn't have a single solution. I think that there are a lot of issues with the state of healing in 14 right now, and maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe there are healers out there who are stoked on the way things are, but just reading through, a lot of forum posts, a lot of people complaining on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, a lot of thoughts and opinions about the way things are right now with healers. I just kind of get the consensus that everybody is tired of the way things are right now. I don't think it has to do with the jobs themselves. I don't think it has to do with the kit necessarily, like the healing kit. I think the healing kits are fine. The issue is that the expectation to do damage is there, reasonably so. I think that every job in the game should be expected to deal damage in fights, because there's just not enough outgoing damage in this game to justify, like, I'm going to stand here and wait and do nothing, and when somebody gets hit, I'm going to immediately heal them. There's not enough damage in this game to do that. Mechanics don't work like that. 9 times out of 10, the way that mechanics work in this game is it's a pass fail. You either succeed or you die. There are definitely mechanics that don't work like that. You get hit and maybe you take a vuln stack or damage down and you have to be healed up. But again, with the way that these healer kits have evolved, all I need to do is throw a regen on you and maybe cast an OGCD and like, you're good. I don't need to worry about you anymore, which takes 2 seconds, you know? Um, and then I go back to hitting 7. You know? And it's just it's a little disheartening. It makes it so that the role, in my opinion, is just not worth exploring or like investing into. And there's something to be said for like healer optimization with like MIT plans and stuff like that. And I know that like super high end raid healers, you have that going for you. But at the end of the day, what those MIT plans show is a timeline of when you are engaging, right? Because outside of that, you're just hitting 7. Um, and that sucks, man. It's really unfortunate. I saw this post on the Final Fantasy XIV Reddit the other day. Uh, I was on there looking for something, and I just saw this post as I was scrolling through, and it struck me as interesting. And I'll probably crop out the name and everything because I don't really want to put this person. I don't want to give any grief to this person, but they opened it talking about how they're new to Final Fantasy XIV and they're having a hard time picking what they want to play at the beginning. And they talk about how in Final Fantasy XI, they played Bard. Um, a Bard in 11 was very different than Bard in 14. It was mostly a support and off healing job was its main role. You used your songs to buff everybody, and you usually used White Mage as a sub job to heal and help keep the party alive. And so you had this dynamic supporting role as a Bard where you could help heal, you could support the job, you could support the party, keep everybody alive, keep them buffed up, keep them strong. And then, in late game, Bard could even like, you could use Ninja sub job and you could go in and do some pretty big damage with your melee attacks. So it was a very different system, very different game, hard to compare. But this person is basically saying, and then they say in World of Warcraft, they play Druid. And so they talk about how they really enjoy being like a hybrid class where they mainly heal, but they also dish out some damage. They like variation in terms of playstyle and ability rotations. They like casting shields. They also like the ability to move people out of damage, rescue, I guess. They like being able to res. They like being able to cast buffs on people. They like a little bit of depth, is their third point. They like to be inventive with their toolkit. They like to stand out for playing well. They like crowd control. And then they kind of talked about just some other, small stuff, role play and stuff like that. It's not really pertinent to my point. But I was reading this and I realized that, healer design in 14 is just like, there's just nothing there for this person. This person is looking for something that doesn't exist in this game, And the more I thought about that, the more I realized that like that's a huge problem where this is a potential new player. They're probably, playing on the free trial. And they're going to post this thread that's like, oh man, I'm really looking to get into this game. I've heard it's really good. I want to play a healer that also has some damage abilities, and I want to have some variance in my play style. I want to have some cool ways to interact with people. And everybody in this thread is just basically saying, yeah, man, you're not going to find it. All of them basically are the same. They all basically do the same damage. Scholar and Sage have some shields, but the other jobs also have shields. This comment right here, gotta be real. I don't think you'll enjoy healing in 14. No healer has any rotation or crowd control. For 90% of the time outside of hardcore content, you will cast the same DPS spell, apply the same dot every 30 seconds, and do a little bit of healing every once in a while. And the next person, as a bard, as a healer main myself, I agree. I don't see anything in their listed preferences that might make me think they're going to enjoy healing. I'd probably point them towards dancer instead for the DPS utility balance. So you have somebody who is a healer main and is talking to somebody who looks at the game and wants to heal, and they're saying, yeah, man, I don't think you should do that. I think you should just play DPS instead. And, you know, the OP comments again, how would you describe healing in 14 if you were to convince somebody to try it out? Healing in 14, the next comment, healing in 14 is akin to playing a simple DPS class that also has the responsibility to keep the party's health bars from reaching zero. Good healers dish out a lot of damage while also healing. The fun of healing in 14 is riding that line to maximize damage while preventing deaths. With a good party, it's easy. With a bad party, it's hard. If that sounds fun to you, then you'll like it. If you just want to heal, that's okay too, but know that you'll get bored, and your party will be wanting you to use downtime for damage. Usually 14 players are a kind and patient lot, so you'll have lots of time to make the transition to learn the ways of healing in 14, but you're basically an off DPS. You know, and it's just it's upsetting to me to see something like this. And the OP commented, is there no noteworthy rotation in regards to DPS spells then? Because when you have stuff like this, you realize that all the healers are based, you know, here's a comment right here. Generally, the healers have a single DPS GCD, a dot GCD, an AoE DPS GCD, and then some job specific extras. And then they kind of break down what each job has. And when you look at it, you realize that these are all the same thing, man. They're all exactly the same. 30-second cast, 30-second CD, OGCD, that's AoE damage and a heal. It's a powerful no cast time GCD charged by using 3 healing spells. Flare 4 is a powerful no cast time healing GCD that deals damage when you can move. Energy Drain is an OGCD that draws the same resources from their healing OGCDs. How much of this will I need to save for healing, or can I burn it all on DPS? You know, like, I think that's this quote right here, it like epitomizes healing in 14, right? How much of my time do I need to look at investing to keep these people alive? Or can I just DPS and let them figure it out? But it's such a shame, because why isn't there some interplay here? You know, why isn't there some connection, some function, something that can take people like this guy or this person, I don't know, this person who made this post, and, you know, give them something that they're excited to play. You know, the impression that I get from this post is that they're going to read all these comments and they might not even play the game. They might be like, oh, well, there's nothing that really is going to strike me here, so I'm just going to not bother. Or if they do, they're not going to play the role that they wanted to play. They're going to play something else, because healing is just not going to do anything for them right now in this game. I'm not sure. I don't know. This was a lot more of a rant than a review, but I just don't have a lot of good things to say about the healing role right now. And, you know, I just think that there's got to be some changes. You know, 8.0, I think is kind of their last chance to make the healing role more engaging, or people are going to be upset. Like, really, I mean, people are already upset. But if there's another expansion of hitting 7 on these healing jobs, yeah, I think it's going to be a real problem for this game, because the people who are willing to do it are starting to not be willing anymore. So I don't know, man. That's all I got. Like I said, a lot more of a rant than a discussion on the jobs themselves, but I just feel like it's important to talk about. And Yeah, I'll probably move into guides again now that this is done. Um, the holidays obviously have slowed me down a little bit with production, but first of the year, um, hopefully I should be getting a little bit more freed up. So hopefully get back on schedule with once a week, but we shall see. And appreciate you guys watching. If you watched this far, please make sure to let me know how crazy you think I am, how wrong you think I am, or if you think I'm right, then let me know, leave a comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.